I was around 10 years old. I was at school, but my mom told me she was thinking of taking me to the doctor's in the afternoon, recurring eye issue. Lunchtime, and I'm in the dining hall when the office woman told me there was a taxi outside for me and I needed to go. I assumed my mom booked it for me as she can't drive. I cleared up my stuff and got my bag, just about to leave when I remembered my jacket in my classroom. I rushed to get and head out for the taxi. Office woman tells me I'm too late and the taxi had gone without me. I just went back to class, but panicking my mom would be angry at me. School finishes and my mom is waiting for me at the gates. I burst into tears, apologizing for missing the taxi and thinking I was in big trouble. She never ordered a taxi and had no clue what I was talking about. She ended up not making the doctor appointment. No one ever found out who ordered the taxi or who driver was. My mom doesn't like to think what would have happened if I hadn't forgotten my jacket and got in that taxi. I worked for a 4-star hotel in Sonoma. One day, a guest, female, mid-50s alone, was scheduled to check out. By noon, she still hadn't checked out. So I left a message informing her that she needed to check out by 1 p.m. At 2:30 p.m., I asked security to accompany me to her room. I was able to unlock the door, but the interior latch was engaged. Security had to force the door open. Immediately, we saw a pool, but her body was not in the bed. We called 911. Later, we found out that she had by cutting her wrists, explaining the pool. She then walked to the tub, filled it with water, and drowned herself. We closed the room for almost a month for deep cleaning. Months later, after the cleaning was finished and the room was available for reservations again, we began noticing something strange. Whenever guests checked out of that room and we asked, "How was your stay?" all of them mentioned feeling as if someone was watching them. They also reported hearing a woman crying in the middle of the night. What's the scariest 100% true story you've heard of? Every orphan source report from the IAEA is terrifying and well documented with pictures. One of the most horrifying is the Gojania accident in 1987. For those who don't know, an orphan source accident is when radioactive material that had been lost, usually from an abandoned hospital, is discovered by people unaware of the danger who inadvertently expose themselves and others to lethal or permanently disfiguring doses of radiation. You read in horror as survivors describe people inviting their neighbors to see the oddity they found and share samples. Children playing with the sparkly dust, all unaware that they have just doomed themselves. Acute radiation exposure is a truly nightmarish way to die. Your flesh rots away over months while skin grafts are ineffective. You deteriorate in pain in the hospital until you die of infection or necrosis. There was an incident in Trinidad where some maintenance divers were removing a plug from an oil pipeline and were instantly sucked into it. One was able to escape, but the other 4 were trapped for days in a small oil-coated pipe for days, with only a small air pocket to breathe in before they died. Thinking about it in detail and imagining what it must have been like for them makes me extremely uncomfortable. The worst part is that the guy who got out promised his friends that he would get help. Once he reached people, they deemed it too dangerous for anyone to go back in there and help and would not let the guy go back in either. So they were promised help but left helpless. What's your creepiest real-life story? When I was little, my mom would take me to Kmart and let me wander around the toy section while she shopped. One day, as I was playing, Simone says, an old man walked up to me and was making small talk while I played. He eventually told me to come with him and took me by the hand. We walked right down the main center aisle of the store, right towards the exit sign in the back. As we crossed the last row, I looked to the right and saw my mom at the end of the row. I told him I saw my mom and had to go. I pulled away my hand and ran down to her. I didn't tell her what happened because I didn't want to get in trouble for going with a stranger. It was several years later that I realized that I had probably narrowly avoided being molested, kidnapped, or worse.
Very similar story. When I was a kid, I was always the last kid picked up by the bus driver to go to school. One day, I was waiting for the bus by myself and a bus with no kids pulled up. The bus driver smiled and told me to hop on. I just had a bad feeling. I said, "Where are the other kids?" He said, "We will go get them now. Just get on." He got more and more pushy but didn't do anything crazy. I just kept saying no and he shrugged and left. The real bus pulled up a few minutes later. I went to school and my parents didn't know until I mentioned it that night. Looking back, they were pretty worried. I remember them scrambling to make a few phone calls.
Last year, a guy came to my house's door around 9 o'clock at night. He knocked and I got my mom, and she went out to see what was up. By the way, we live in a very rural area, so visits that late are extremely uncommon and strange. The guy talked to my mom about how he was opening a business, asked whether she liked American-made products. then handed her a Clorox container as a sample. He went back to his minivan and opened it to get a vacuum cleaner when my mom saw 5 other men sitting inside. She told me to run and get my phone, since we don't have a landline. I couldn't find it, so I got my knife and stood around the corner. She threw the container outside and told them to get the hell off her property, as well as that she was calling the cops. They peeled out of the driveway and we never saw the car again. 2 months later, my mom found a single, bearded guy putting filled garbage bags by the back door. She asked him what the hell he was doing. He responded by saying, "This is for your little girl, my little sister." Again, she told him to get the hell out, then went through the bags. They were filled with garbage, dirty clothes, and empty tampon containers. I forgot to mention that each of these exchanges occurred at the back door when the light was off.
Working as a paramedic, I was dispatched to what went out as a simple assault call in a bad neighborhood. This was around 10 p.m. We arrived at the address to find a man standing behind a row of parallel parked cars in front of his house, yelling in a strange, high-pitched voice. The police were trying to calm him down. Our first assumption walking up to him was that this was the guy who was injured. But once we got the gurney around the parked cars, we saw what was really going on. A dead man was leaned up against a Mini Cooper, slouched in the gutter. I'll never forget coming round the car to find him. There was this really unsettling moment that lasted about 2 seconds, where I thought he was alive and staring at me. Then realizing he was looking through me. Then realizing he was dead. He was shirtless and had been stabbed multiple times. And these were brutal wounds. Most stabbings I'd seen up till that point seemed to be simple penetrations. But this guy's chest and abdomen had been torn to shreds. It was nasty. The guy standing on the curb was yelling in that weird, warbly voice, crying, asking if his roommate would be okay. We started CPR and scooped him up and took him to the hospital, knowing that there really was no chance for this guy. After the doctor pronounced him, a couple of cops came over from the scene to square away business involving the victim. One of them really dropped a bomb on us. The story they had heard before our arrival was that the victim had left the house to have a smoke, and when his roommate came out to check on him, he found him stabbed to death outside. But after we left for the hospital, someone noticed a trail of blood leading from the house to the curb, implying that he had been stabbed inside. When the police confronted the roommate about this, he managed to run inside and barricade himself in-house. There was actually a SWAT team over there dealing with the situation as we spoke. So anyway, the person who had most likely brutally murdered our patient that night had been standing there, right behind me for most of the call. Pretty creepy.
Have you experienced something you still can't explain? Another time while moving, my husband and I passed through the city of Colma, California, which is a giant graveyard city. I took a ton of amazing photos, got back in the moving truck, and was so excited about them, I decided to upload them onto my computer right away as I was passenger. I'm uploading them to my laptop. While driving, we thought something hit our truck. We pulled over to check it out. The sky behind us was the blackest storm I've ever seen. Couldn't figure out what hit us, so we got back in and kept driving. To this day, I've never been able to access any of those photos. All of them, gone. Not even the prior uploaded ones saved. Couldn't get them even when I took the digital card to a professional. I've never had that happen in all the years of taking photos before or after this incident.
Me and my 2 pals are driving to a music festival. We are in a big intersection and it's raining. Driver is starting to move along from the stop and we all hear a calm voice saying stop and finish though. Driver slams the brakes and car that was coming from a blind side zooms past our front of car, probably few inches away. The voice sounded feminine and again really calm. Radio wasn't on, etc. I'm not into supernatural stuff at all, but to this day we haven't got any explanation whatsoever what happened. Next half hour we didn't even talk to each other, because state of WTF just happened.
I was almost abducted. Went to a park when I was like 6 with my sister and my mom, and there was a really nice man who helped me up when I didn't quite stick the landing at the end of the slide. My mom noticed him and figured he was just being polite. Well, my sister runs off to my mom for a minute, so I'm alone. I look up and see the man looking at me and walk around the play area behind the slides and by the pond away from view of the parents. I was curious, so I followed. He was crouched by the pond out of sight, and I remember tidbits, but I do remember he told me I was pretty and very mature for my age. He then was in the middle of asking me if I was only here with my sister when my mom emerges, absolutely terrified and in a state of panic. Never seen her like that to this day, and I think that's partly why it was seared into my memory. The man ran when she started yelling, "What the fuck do you think you're doing?" I started sobbing because my mom was yelling. She never yells, but it took me a few years to fully understand what happened and what could have happened. I did have the stranger danger talk, but I just thought the man was so nice. That's all I really remember from that day. I'm 99% sure my mom reported what happened to the police, but no idea what happened after.
Voices in my head. After I was discharged from the hospital following treatment for psychosis, the voices didn't disappear. They changed. They became calm, focused, more like instructions than chaos. And they were specific. They told me what to do next, step by step. One day they said, "Go to the basketball court." It made no sense. I had never played basketball in my life. I had always been poor at sports, uncoordinated, never athletic. But I did have a gym membership nearby that included a court. So I went, just to see. I picked up a ball. The voice told me exactly where to stand, then where to aim. I shot, the ball went clean through the rim, a perfect shot. I shot again, same result, 10 throws. All 10 went through the rim, smooth and effortless, like I wasn't the one doing it. It continued for some more days. I kept returning, and each time the voice guided me. Every shot landed. The court didn't feel like a gym anymore. It felt like a space being used for something else, something precise, ritualistic, outside of me. I still don't know what that moment was. It wasn't a hallucination. It wasn't a dream. It was physical, undeniable, and completely beyond what should have been possible, especially for someone like me. What was your creepy, unexplainable story? As a child, that was confirmed by your parents to have happened. When my family went to the Georgian mountain region, we rented a cottage, 2 bedrooms, so my brother and I took one, and our dad took the other, with his GF. I woke up in the middle of the night to 3 figures in the room, all standing in various places, none of which were visible from the entrance of the room. I woke my brother up, and we screamed for our dad, but when he came into the room, he refused to look at the figures and just told us to hide under the covers. Wasn't exactly confirmed, but his refusal to look where they were standing after begging him was telling. Shit still scares my brother and I. Edit. I emailed my dad and all he said back was that he wished he had looked. God damn it, you're supposed to say they were just shadows.
My granny died when I was little. I don't even remember her. My aunt and mom always told me this story. I was at my house when I was little, I think about 4. The phone rang and I answered it. They got on to me for answering the phone. I told them it was my granny calling to see if I was okay. I told her yes and hung up. She had recently passed away. They said they were a little creeped out by it, but insisted it really happened.